My name is Natasha Zavadskala, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cultural Events Coordinator at Alliance Française of Washington, D.C., and I'm thrilled to speak with Oliver G., the host and voice behind the Paris-based popular podcast, The Earful Tower. Yes, you heard me right. We're going to be traveling to Paris by ear, thanks to Oliver and his recent book, Paris on Air. So I read the book this week, and from my accent, you can probably tell that I'm Russian. So I spent a couple of years in Paris as a foreigner too. And this book brings a lot of very nice and sometimes not so nice memories about Paris. It's a very good read with very humble, sincere, light sense of humor. And for those of you who haven't been to Paris, that's also a very good read to prepare for your future adventure when the borders are opened. Before we dive into Oliver and his memoir, I would like to thank our guests for your generous donations. Your support means the whole world to us. So really, thank you. We appreciate it a lot. A big merci to you. Let's start. Oliver G is originally from Australia, and he's been living in Paris since 2015, and he's moved around, and he's now, as far as I know, lives in Montmartre. And in his book, Paris on Air, he's telling his stories of life in Paris, learning French, meeting friends, buying cheese, figuring out French people, French culture, and learning what it is to be Le Parisien. Hi, Oliver. It's great to have you here. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. And thank you to everybody for spending your Sunday morning with me. What a treat.
Yeah. So, Oliver, you moved to Paris in 2015 to continue work as a journalist, and then you sort of gradually transitioned to a very new experience, a podcaster. We'll talk about that later. But my first question is, so why did you decide to write Paris on Air? What made you write the book?
Good question. And before I answer, just out of pure curiosity, I'm looking at everyone's faces now. If people could just so I know what audience I'm talking to, how many of you guys have a pretty good idea of who I am already? If you just wave, so I can see a show of hands. Well, that's a lot of hands. Okay, and then just as a follow-up question to the audience, how many of you have read the book already?
Oh, wow.
Okay, cool. Okay, wow. Okay, so there'll be some fun questions at the end. I already forgot the question. I got so excited with that. Was it why did I decide to write this book? I think firstly, I used to be a journalist and I really liked writing, and the bit that I enjoyed the most wasn't really the journalism. It was writing kind of columny, observational articles. So I used to like writing things like, isn't it weird how the French people do this? Or isn't it nice how this? Or whatever. Things I'd noticed, things that I'd done. But in a country like France, the news is very serious, so I didn't get to write very much of it. And then, so I liked writing. I always wanted to write a book. And then when I started a podcast, I found it was a lot of people still don't get podcasts, but everyone gets books. And as soon as I wrote a book, it made it a lot easier to open doors like this, to chat with you guys in Washington, D.C. Whereas if you just have a podcast, no one really seems to invite you anywhere. So I guess it was a way to tell my story a little bit in a more traditional sense that people understood. So that's why I did it. And
how long did it take you? How long did it take you to write the book? And did you learn anything new about yourself while writing it?
Yeah, it took about 2 years to write, and it took longer than I anticipated because there wasn't an end to the story. It's based over 5 years that I lived in Paris, and when I started writing it, I just thought I'd been there for such interesting times as a journalist during the horrific terror attacks, but also, there's so many memoirs written by older women, for example, and I thought it could be cool to have one written by a younger guy. And I was just waiting for something big to happen for the end pages. And then, you guys who've read the book know that it ends on a pretty big bang. So it took about 2 years, and the thing I learned about myself is that being a journalist really helps to write a book, because the focus of being a journalist is on what's important for a story, and what's unimportant you get rid of. So that really helped to figure out how to write a book, I think.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, it was very cool. The very last moment in the book with the clicking, and I will not reveal more for those who haven't read the book.
Well, that was a pretty good clue. There's clicking involved in the last page. What could it mean? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. As an English speaker, you have very keen observations of the French language and the learning process, right? So tell us more about how you learned French. What helped you learn French, right? And if you have any favorite quirks of the language you can share with us.
Yeah, I've got. Okay, so I think because I learned Swedish before I learned French, so I'm really sort of I like language, and I really tune into idiosyncrasies and oddities and untranslatable words, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff in the book, and it helps you to learn. At least it helps me to learn to be really interested in it. When I hear a new phrase, or I like a new phrase, I start using it straight away, or I investigate the etymology of it or whatever. And I find that really interesting. In terms of learning, something that I also mentioned in the book is the idea of forcing yourself to speak it. So there's, I think a few of you guys might remember, there's a chapter with my neighbor, a young French guy from Grenoble. And in those early days when I moved to Paris, we used to buy, and I'm not condoning excessive drinking by any means, but we bought a bottle of wine each, and we'd meet and we'd do half an hour only in French and then half an hour only in English, because he wanted to learn English so he could illegally stream the latest Game of Thrones episodes, because he couldn't bear to wait until it came out dubbed on French TV. So we'd do half an hour until the wine was gone. So that idea of forcing yourself, you know, it's so easy, especially you guys living in the States, in a class maybe with other Americans, for example. It's so easy to go, you know, oh, c'est quoi le, what's the word for this? Whereas if you force yourself to only speak French, you can learn it a lot quicker. And then the other thing is to make mistakes. And that's kind of half of what I do in Paris when I speak French, is just make mistakes. And to finish the question, a new favorite word that I've got that I haven't even talked about on the podcast or the book or anything, but I learned it recently is, in fact, I'll do this a fun way. I'll tell you the word and you put your hand up if you know what it means, okay? So the word is ramasse-miettes.
Mm.
We get one, two. Okay, that's cool. So the word I learned it in a fancy restaurant, which I don't usually go to, but I happened to be in one. And the waitress came and she scraped the crumbs off the table with this really fancy silver flat thing. And I was like, what is that? And I don't know if that reveals that I don't go to fancy restaurants. Maybe they're everywhere, or if it just reveals that it was very French or very unusual. She said, oh, monsieur, this is a ramasse-miettes, which is like a bread crumber, I guess. I found it fascinating, you know, especially, you know, a country like France where bread is so important that they have a silver scraper for it in a restaurant. So there you go. I'm just eager to learn. And those people who put their hands up, did you know or were you wrong? You knew?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, good, good, good.
Great. Yeah. Speaking about words, actually, in one of your podcast episodes, and that's your own words, I think you say that you're obsessed with untranslatable words, right? I'm fascinated by the topic myself. So can you please explain what it is, what it means, untranslatable word, and name a couple of your favorite ones?
Sure. Okay, so I've got very specific rules on this, and I have to explain the rules, otherwise people always tell me I'm wrong. So according to my own rules, an untranslatable word is a word that you find in a foreign language that doesn't have a single word in English, right? So for example, the word fromage is not untranslatable because we have cheese. The word ramasse-miettes, maybe there's a word for it in English, but none of us probably know it. But that's not one of mine anyway. A good example of an untranslatable word would be juilletiste. Juilletiste, which literally translated is a July person. But what it really means is someone who takes their annual holiday during the month of July rather than the month of August. And in fact, there's a word for the August guys too, Haussien. So they will have headlines in French newspapers that say, oh, stay off the roads this week, it's the juilletists. And to have that headline, it doesn't make sense in the States or in Australia where I'm from, or in Sweden where I am right now. It just, words like that. So there's that. The one that everyone's probably familiar with is flaneur or flaneuse, someone who likes to kind of walk aimlessly, you know, which is very French. There's all these nuances. So words, things like that. and I think I wrote a whole chunk of it in the book. Just things that I've observed. I think, and I also wrote in the book that I'm convinced that people are only interested in intricacies of a language for about, like, what did I write, about 2.5 minutes, and then you lose them. So at the risk of making everybody yawn, I'll leave it at that, Natasha, before scaring everybody.
Actually, yes. But before we finish, you mentioned that you're in Sweden right now, right? And in one of you once you mentioned this word fika, right? That's a Swedish one. It's a little bit unrelated, but wait, which means coffee and cakes. But there's so much more to that, right? I actually know a Finnish word. I forgot it, but one single word means to stay at home all day, do nothing, to stay at home all day in your pajama and do nothing. Isn't it great? So relevant to our times too. So maybe during the Q&A, we can ask everyone, maybe you know some other words like that, untranslatable words of different languages.
I love it. I think it's fascinating, and there's a lot in Japanese that are unusual, and in Italian, and that's one of the ways I got interested in it. Is I remember there was an Italian word for the mark a glass of wine leaves on the table, you know, like that circle. And I don't remember the word is, I don't speak Italian, but I thought it was so fascinating. And anyway, since then I've been collecting them in Swedish and French, and I've got enough for a whole new list if I were to write a second book.
Yeah, someone says lots in Yiddish, yes, in Hebrew. Okay, yeah, let's definitely talk about that later during the Q&A. And yeah, so my next question is, as much Paris and is a memoir, it's also a love story. Love to beautiful Lena, a lovely Swede, your wife. Love to the red beast. Oh, you gotta know what it is. It's the red scooter. Oliver drives around in Paris, and not only in Paris, he once did a whole trip around France, as many of you know, right? And love of Paris, obviously. So my question is, when did you realize that love of Paris plays such a big role in your memoir, but I guess in your life too, because memoir is basically your life?
Yeah, it's funny. I realized that it was a love story when I did the first of these Alliance Française chats after it was published. The first one I did was in Boston, and the guy asked a really similar question to yours, Natasha. And or the woman, actually, she said it's a love story. I was like, oh yeah, it is a love story. I didn't even really realize, but I guess I'm the kind of guy that has a lot of love for things in my heart, if it's my wife or Paris or the scooter or France or whatever. And I think it just comes across like that on the podcast too. I don't sit down and think I'm going to write a love story here. In fact, far from it. It just came out that way. So there was nothing. I don't know if you believe me when I say that, but it's totally true. Like, I didn't sit down intending to do it like that, but it does. It comes across as a love letter for Paris, and I really do love it. There was this guy that messaged me on Instagram yesterday who also lives in Paris, and he says, he goes, man, I want to start my own podcast just saying how much Paris annoys me. And I was like, we're very different people, I said to him, because it doesn't get on my nerves like it does for a lot of the people that live there. It honestly doesn't. So I don't know, to answer your question, it just kind of came about that way. And I think probably that's how, I don't know, I guess maybe that's how I keep talking to people about it, because that resonates with people, a love story, I suppose. But,
yeah, it came natural, yeah. I wouldn't imagine, I mean, you wouldn't be able to write a book unless you had a very strong feeling towards Paris, be it love or hate. So in your case, it's obviously love.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, fair enough.
So you've covered a lot of events. You've lived through a lot of events in Paris, right? And some of them were very tragic, like the terrorist attacks on the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, and then the later attacks of November 2015. I guess I have two questions here. The first one is, what was your impression of French people, Parisians' reaction, not only Parisians, obviously, French people reactions to that in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks, because you were there and you were talking to people, obviously. And my other question, sort of connected, is, so have you seen Paris change? Is Paris 2015 different from Paris 2020? Obviously, there's pandemics, but beyond that.
Sure. The main thing that I noticed with Parisians with regards to the terror attacks is how resilient they were. And you could see it after Charlie Hebdo, within it was 2 days later, there was that big march in the street. Like 1 million people, 1 million or 2 million, was it? Just so many people out on the streets. So there was this resilience, this need to get back to normal, and we saw it again in November, how quickly people got back to the terraces after those tragic shootings, and I was really impressed by that. And like from a personal note, I found it like from a personal, I can't really get into all these details now because it takes too long, but like when I moved there to cover that Charlie Hebdo attack, I had no idea, I didn't understand it, and I didn't have the context because I wasn't a Parisian, I just didn't get it. Like, which is kind of a theme for the book. When I moved there, I didn't really understand much. And then a year later, when that second one happened, it meant a lot more to me because I understood the city, the people, it was in my neighborhood, the places where I used to go out. So it was a very different and stronger reaction, but the overwhelming thing was resilience. And in terms of the way that the city's changed, there's some obvious things like the big glass or perspex thing around the Eiffel Tower now. In the old days, probably when a lot of you guys visited Paris in the years of yesteryear or whatever you'd say, you could walk straight under and look straight up into it, but now you have to go through the security. And there were, I think the things that are changing in Paris are actually exciting now with the virus aside, like the way that they're getting. I read the other day that the mayor wants to get rid of something like 60% of the cars. That made me so excited. I've always said that the ugliest part of Paris streets is that there's cars parked on either side of them. So Paris will keep changing as it expands into the greater Paris area as well. I'm excited about it.
Actually, that's an interesting question I have here. I want to know the answers. So in one of your podcast episodes, you're talking about why people actually love Paris, and what would be the first thing people do when they are able to come back to Paris, right? Can you share some of the responses with us?
Yeah, so I had this, I'm currently sitting in Sweden right now, and I'll be back in Paris in a week, and I've been in Sweden for a little while. My wife's Swedish, long story anyway. And I was thinking about getting back myself and what I'm looking forward to. And I was thinking that there are so many people who listen to my show, my podcast, who love Paris. In fact, probably the 77 people sitting here right now, especially Sonia with the Paris sweater there, I assume you guys really love Paris. And it got me thinking, why do people love Paris so much? And so rather than just ask people, why do you love Paris? I asked around the members of my show. I said, what is the first thing you want to do when you get back into the city, the French capital? And based on that, I made an episode. I tried to deduce why people love Paris so much. It was really cool because people were saying surprising things. Some people would say, like, the first thing I want to do is I want to get back and walk into a supermarket, into a Monoprix, and just see the French food, like at a supermarket. It's kind of really surprising, like I live there, so I see it every day. And then there are a lot of people talking about the food in greater detail. I want to buy a baguette and bite the end off it as I walk down the street, or I want to see jazz music on the street. Just all these things that people wanted to do. A lot of crying, a lot of breathing of Paris air, but all these kind of things. And it was refreshing too, because, like if you ask people why they love Paris, I think people tend to give a fake answer that, but, people will say, oh, I love I just love Audrey Hepburn and whatever, I don't think it doesn't give you the same sort of immediate, longing that these people had for the first thing they want to do. So I just collected all the answers and read them out on a recent podcast episode, and it was pretty fun. Like, I got a lot of responses to it. So I don't know. That could be something in the Q&A too. Maybe people have some crazy ones. The supermarket was my favorite though.
Yeah, I guess people coming to America, Trader Joe's would be an experience, right? It's a very particular shop here. And also, I loved you or someone on the podcast saying how many people love sort of get lost in Paris and let Paris happen to you. I really like that phrase. I think that grasps a lot about Paris. Yeah.
In fact, that's what tomorrow's podcast episode. And so for you guys who don't know anything about podcast, it's free on your phone to listen to. You just subscribe on the little app called Podcast. The episode tomorrow is all about walking in Paris, being a flaneur. And I had this history expert come on talk about how people were walking in, how the medieval ages of Paris changed the way people walked, with gas lamps, sidewalks, the shoes they used to wear, the muddy streets, and then through the Haussmannian intervention, how they raised the city and changed the way it was all structured, and then into the future, all these bike lanes that are popping up, how walking is changing. So if you guys are into these kind of topics, you should absolutely listen out for tomorrow's podcast episode as well. A little shout out for my own show there.
Yeah, I just sent a link in chat for those of you who are curious to check out everything about the podcast in the book. And yeah, so at some point in your book, you're arguing about what is the street of Paris, right? So can you tell us what's that for you? And maybe also, I don't know, briefly describe your favorite walking route, or maybe in your case, that would be a riding route because you drive on your scooter.
Okay, so in the book, there was... I talked at first that I said that Rue Montorgueil in the second arrondissement is the best street in Paris because I used to live next to it. And I was convinced that it was true. It had a mix and match of everything that I liked until I moved to Montmartre about a year or two ago. And I live not so far from Rue des Abbesses, which runs, I guess it runs west to east, sort of along all those pretty cafes. It's worth looking up. In fact, if someone's doing the Googling around, I think I did a video on YouTube called Rue des Abbesses, the best street in Paris. Anyway, I love it. It's full of everything you need. There's not wild amounts of tourists there. And even when they are, they're happy to be there, which makes me happy as well. They're walking around like, this is where I'm meant to be. But there's so many bakeries, butchers. It's like a little village up there. And I do a lot of videos up there. I did a walk up there. For you guys who are new around here, I think I invented it actually. I call it the walk show. So it's like a talk show, but while walking on a live stream on YouTube. And I have a guest and I show the viewers at home, like now I show you around Paris. And I did a walk up there with the mayor of Montmartre fairly recently, the mayor of the 18th district. And he was pointing out some things too, including behind the scenes of an artist's studio, the Bateau Lavoir. So if you're a deep Paris fan, go and check that one out. Maybe some of you have seen it already. Anyway, there's a long answer to a short question, but Rue des Abbesses, and to the best walk, just walk from one end of it to the other and you can't go wrong.
Oliver, so let's talk more about podcasting in general. Like, I guess we all sort of know what a podcast is, right? But like, we're scared to leave your full-time paid job as a journalist for the news agency to sort of create something totally new, right? There was no guide what it is to be a podcaster. You kind of created your own job. So I guess that's fascinating. Can you talk more about that? And like, what's so special about your podcast, The Earful Tower?
Okay, that's the easy bit. What's so special about my podcast is out of all the French Paris content channels that you guys follow, guarantee you mine is the most entertaining. I say it with conviction. I guarantee you'll laugh and enjoy it. I'm very confident to say it. There's some people laughing. I think that means that you agree with me. But there's a lot of good Paris content, but mine's very entertaining. I specifically make it like that. And in terms of quitting the job, it was a bit scary, but what happened, and this is mentioned in the book as well, is I was ordering some coffees in a coffee shop called Le Peloton, which I talk about quite a lot. And as I was ordering the coffees in English, this guy comes up to me and he goes, "Oh my God, you're Oliver G, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, you run the podcast." And he got really excited. He recognized my voice from ordering the coffee. This was before I did videos and stuff. And he just told me how much he liked it, blah, blah, blah. And then this is exactly how it happened. I went and sat out the front with the coffees, all kind of excited to be recognized for the first time. And I was like jostling with my wife and a friend, wasn't that cool? And then this American woman spotted me from across the street, and she was quite loud. She was like, "Oh my God, oh my God." And she ran up and she goes, "Oh my God, everything I'm doing in Paris," I should have warned you I was going to try and do an American accent. She goes, "Everything I'm doing in Paris is based on your recommendations. Thank you so much." And I realized at that point that there was some opportunity there that I was missing out on. And then I just quit the job directly, and I had zero salary. And I was like, if I'm brimming with enthusiasm for this project, then I'll be able to make a career out of it somehow. And by what I did the whole 3 years in 30 seconds is I started a membership platform on a website called Patreon. Is anyone here a patron? Just wave. Oh, wow, that is so humbling. Thank you so much, guys. Okay, so my goal was to get to minimum wage by people, just like Netflix. People sign up for $10 a month, and I do all this bonus stuff like videos. And then after I got the minimum wage, I just tried to get it to a sort of livable wage. And now as it grows, I'm just building the show, starting to hire people and make it better. And the reason I think I got to where I got to today is just because I was 100% confident in it, probably from that day when the guy recognized me. I was like, if people like it that much, then there's a job in it. And why would I sit here covering the news that was often, and I think you guys could probably agree with me, probably why you're watching today is the news can just get so depressing, especially right now. And I got so sick of covering it and having a boss say, cover that story, when I could do my own thing. So there's the 30-second version. And thank you so much to those people waving who were Patreon subscribers. There'll be a link to that later, I think.
What are the most interesting guests on your podcast? You talk to a lot of people.
Oh, who is the most interesting guest? So that is hard because there've been like 200 or 300 guests or something now, I think. But I think the ones that I enjoy talking to a lot are the ones who don't have something to sell, you know? So if I interview an author or a supermodel or a tour guide or something, deep down they want to sell something, and that's fair enough, you know? Same with I'm here because I want to sell books and get new listeners. I'm be totally honest, and that's why most people do this stuff. You know, if someone goes on David Letterman, it's because he's got a movie coming out. And it's the same with my show. When people come on my show, they usually want to sell their product. But my favorite are the guests who have nothing to sell. So one of the very earliest guests, like 2.5 years ago, is I was lost in the Marais, and there was this guy, British guy, came up to me. He was like 80 years old, and he said, "Oh, you lost? I could help you." And we get chatting. Turned out he'd been an expat in Paris for 50 years. So I said, I'd love to interview you just to hear how it's changed. So, and I'll embed this too on the thing. And we get chatting, and I realize immediately he doesn't care. He has nothing to sell. He doesn't have any Instagram to follow, any whatever. He didn't even have the internet, so he couldn't even listen to it. I had to go and show him the episode after. But that conversation with him was very pure and honest because he was just giving the answers to the questions. And that's always rare and refreshing. So those kind of episodes I find to be the most interesting, although, you know, often the people I have on the show have interesting stories. Or the woman who, I don't know if I want to reveal it, but the woman who released 2 exotic animals into the Canal Saint-Martin, that was one of my favorites. And I will not say another word about what it is because I want
don't say. I'm going to read the book for that. And yeah, speaking of book, I want to dive into the book a little more. And there's this chapter called Smile, and I thought it was just so hilarious and so interesting, where you say be a happy cow and smile about it. Can you tell us what it is? Can you talk us through that chapter a little bit?
So there's all, I don't know, you know how I said that there are some Paris accounts who aren't so entertaining. There are some people who give you all these warnings like don't smile in Paris unless you want to, you know, attract unwanted attention or whatever. And I'm like, that is so ridiculous. What are you saying that for? You got to smile. Let me preface this with, you might get some unwanted attention if you do it on the metro or whatever. But if you're going into a shop, you go in there and you say bonjour, you say bonjour, ça va, which is another theme from the book. But smile, just be super happy. And what's the worst that's going to happen? What's the worst that's going to happen is that they don't smile back at you, right? The best that happens is they see that you're a friendly person and they get chatting. And if you guys are like me, and I assume that a lot of you are, then you're hoping to improve your French. And if you want to have a conversation with your butcher or your baker or your candlestick maker, then smile when you go in there because it starts a happy conversation. You know, and then the next thing is, the other thing I think I wrote in the book is it shows probably that you're a foreigner like me. And that's a really good conversation starter too. So they go, who's this guy or this woman in here smiling right now? Must be a foreigner. Where are they from? And next thing you're in small talk. And next thing you're in medium talk. You might even get to small, medium, big. You might even get to big talk, and it all starts with a smile. So I say that I'm a huge believer in that, and I do realize that there's probably some downsides to it, but I think the upsides really outweigh it. And you'll always see me smiling in Paris because it just makes for a better life.
Yeah, yeah. And you also mentioned there's this expression, I'm sure you all know, to speak a language comme une vache espagnole. And I think you sort of transformed this phrase and said, oui, je parle français comme une vache australienne. And you give an advice to people to sort of play around with this phrase. And what was the reaction of people? Did they laugh at you? Did they like it?
So for the guys who don't understand, the French saying is, I speak French like a Spanish cow. And that means my French isn't very good. I always thought that was a pretty cutesy little phrase, but I don't know how I got the idea, but I switched it to, I speak French like an Australian cow. And I say it all the time. Like if I have to call up to the tax office or anyone, and they're speaking too quickly, I say, oh, mais désolé, je parle français comme une vache australienne. And straight away they'll laugh because it's so ridiculous. It's just a stupid thing to say. And then they'll also know not just to speak slower, but they'll know that I'm Australian. And they might be like, oh, where are you from in Australia? So we're back to the level that I'm comfortable with, you know? So I do it probably embarrassingly much. I'll do it when I'm buying a peach or something from a shop. Like I'll get it in there because I'm always wanting to have a conversation, partly to meet people, partly to practice my French, partly because I think I want to live in a society where we talk to each other, you know? So, yeah. So I don't know. I chucked that one out there and I put it on the podcast once. I got a lot of emails in. It works for everyone. If you guys want to say it, you say comme une vache américaine if you're American. And you have to do it in the feminine because a cow is a feminine word. Although I guess it doesn't matter if you say it wrong because the whole point is that you're not speaking.
At this point, I think it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But it's
That's great. Yeah.
Guaranteed that will bring, if you say that and they don't laugh, there's something wrong with them, not you. It's a guarantee.
Yeah. Irene says that was her favorite part of the book. Yeah. And I guess you all need a good smile right now. So that's a very good advice. And before I ask you to read a short passage from the book, I guess my last question is, do you have any other writing projects or any other kind of, podcasting or whatever projects?
I got loads. I've got, for the podcast, the plan is when I get back to Paris to do 20, the plan is to do 20 to 1. There are 20 districts in the city, 20 arrondissements. And my goal is to visit one of them each week and do an episode. I started doing this before the lockdown. And I was going from 1 to 20, and it got stuck in the beginning of the lockdown. But when I got up to like 8, the 8th district, the New York Times did a big write-up about the podcast, so I must have been onto something good. So I want to start it again, but start at 20 and go down towards 1. So that's for the podcast. Oh, and another exciting thing for the podcast, here's a little sneak behind the scenes, is a while back I interviewed Ernest Hemingway. Someone looked up just then, but he's dead. Yes, of course he's dead. I talked to a tour guide who is a very good imitator, and I've snagged Edith Piaf for an upcoming episode. So there's something to look forward to. In terms of writing, me and my wife, who's an illustrator, are working on a very exciting project that only Patreon supporters know about for now. And in terms of writing another book, I'm working on the follow-up to Paris on Air already. Because I think the first one went well enough to warrant a second one. So there you go. There's 3 answers to 3 questions. Was there another?
No.
Email notifications that people are buying the books and signing up on Patreon. So you guys are very lovely. I'm looking at you, Jennifer and Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. Would you mind reading a short passage from your book before we start with the Q&A and the questions?
Sure, I'd love to. I'll read the first 2 pages, and I think just so I know, how many people have read the first 2 pages? Because I know you can read it free online. Okay, not many of you. Okay, go. I'll give it everything then. And I'm not going to be able to see your reactions while I've got the page open, so that's going to be weird. I have to be able to see if you're laughing or not. I'm going to minimize you. Okay, so I can still see a lot of you now. So if you find it funny, tilt your head back and laugh like your life depends on it, so that I know it's working. Fair enough? Yeah, okay,
Yes.
good. Great crowd, I love it. Okay, introduction, the first 2 pages of the book. I'll just have a sip of my water here because we're going to get dramatic here. Introduction, Paris on Air. The ring weighed heavy in my pocket as we stepped into the cold Paris night. And it wasn't heavy because it was big. It definitely wasn't big. It was more heavy in the sense that I felt a crushing pressure from my imminent proposal. We were leaving a left bank party and were set to walk to Hemingway's bar in the Ritz. My plan was to stop on a bridge somewhere along the Seine River, to ask her to marry me, then to continue to the hotel bar. I double-checked the directions discreetly. A 20-minute walk, fairly straightforward, but as we stepped out into the crisp evening air on Rue de l'Odéon, a light rain began to fall. I'm going to do Lena's accent, my Swedish wife, so if it sounds a bit Swedish, she's in the next room, so I might get in trouble with this. Let's grab a cab, she said. A cab? No, we have to walk. I thought, I can't propose to her in a taxi, can I? We don't need a taxi. Paris is beautiful when it rains, I responded. I can't even walk. My shoes are too small, she pleaded. Can't we get a cab? Should I throw it all in? Postpone the proposal? No, the timing is perfect. Don't be silly, we'll never find a cab, I lied. And the Ritz is just a short walk away anyway, I lied again. We set off in the rain, or I suppose you could call it a light drizzle, almost a mist really, and we made it down through the Christmas lights on the left bank to the Seine. But I could hardly breathe. The one ring was weighing me down. Where's the Pont Neuf? That's a romantic one, I thought. The Pont Neuf? That's way behind us. It's in the wrong direction, she answered. Oh God, I'm thinking out loud again. The ring is controlling me. I need to regain control, find a bridge, get to the middle, ask her to marry me. The nearest bridge was the famed Pont des Arts, but even late on a Sunday night, there were still pedestrians crossing it. Through the drizzle, I swear I could see a man down on one knee. No good, too much of a cliche. What's that next one up the road? It looks nice, it looks old, it looks romantic. Must get to bridge, must destroy the ring. We got to the old stone crossing, the Pont du Carrousel, which led to the Louvre Museum on the right bank. The bridge was empty, not a person or a car in sight. It was perfect. I had to ask her right then. That, or I had to cast the ring into the Seine and be rid of it forever. I turned to look at her. Hair wet from the drizzling rain, eyes glowing golden from the reflected lights of the Paris lampposts, feet swollen from the undersized shoes. Yes, the moment was right. My precious, I began. Weird, I never called her that before. We've been in Paris for 3 years now, but it still feels like those first nights. Clueless, hopeless, and penniless. Those were the best nights of my life. And I want to spend the rest of my nights and the rest of my days with you. Will you marry me? I'd stopped breathing about 2 minutes earlier. I swayed, time stopped. Then I heard her say yes, 4 times to be sure, and I breathed again. I slipped the ring on her finger. The weight was lifted and she kissed me in the Paris rain. We moved on towards the Ritz Hotel with the lights of Place Vendôme leading the way. This promised to be the start of something beautiful. Now, if I had known that on our honeymoon 6 months later, I'd be lying by the side of the road in the French countryside in agony from a mysterious disease, I'd have thrown the damned ring in the river and jumped in after it. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you, Oliver.
What a round of applause. Oh, thank you very much.
I see someone saying, I'm crying. And,
who's crying?
Undersized shoes. I guess that.
Christina, there you go. Oh, you guys are so lovely.
Thank you, Oliver. It's been great. Thank you for for sharing the stories with us. And I guess now is the time for any of you to ask whatever questions you want to ask Oliver. So please go ahead. You can write it either in chat or just like go ahead and talk and ask a question.
While people are writing, I might add on a personal note that if you enjoyed that reading, I think what you'd really enjoy is the audiobook. So I did it. I made the audiobook during the lockdown. And all the characters, so when I imitated my Swedish wife, in the actual audio experience, I call it, she reads her lines and the neighbor reads his lines and my friends and the doctor, whatever. So there's like, I think there's like 20 characters in it. So there's something to keep an eye out for. And I put the link there for all the links. Anyway, over to you, Natasha.
If you don't mind, Natasha, I will read Cecile comments because it's a great one. And hi, Cecile, I'm missing you and a few of you actually. I saw Meredith, I saw Heidi was there, Tracy, Candace, and a few others, and Skip, which I'll see tomorrow. But hey, Cecile saying, Oliver, following along with you on your walking tours puts me in Paris where I love to be. Your walk shows bring out your passion for the city and history. Your voice comes through in your book. Pure and honest, and as you were just describing the expat, plus your enthusiasm. I've been searching for how to convey that to you, and you gave it to me. So I love the Lord of the Rings connection in your story, Wisdom, my precious. And somebody else, Lillian says...
That's a great comment.
Yes, that's a really great comment. Bijou says that's awesome, and then Lillian said, we have switched lives. I am Paris born, but moved to Australia with my family as a child.
Great, I'll answer some of them. Okay, I've got the chat up now so I can see them too. Thank you, Cecile. I recognize your name. It's nice to see you.
Several times I've tried to tell you how wonderful it is that you bring Paris to us the way you do. And seeing you and Lena together you are a very special couple, I think. And you are both so genuine and sincere that I think you're a gift to all of us. And thank you, because we can't get there. So you're making it possible for us to at least walk around with you.
As you know, Cecile, it's my great pleasure, and I'm so honored that you've been a follower for a long time. So thanks for that, and nice to see you.
Thank you.
And then in terms of Sonia, yes, there was a Lord of the Rings connection in there all the way through those first pages. If you read it again or listen carefully, which apparently a lot of people didn't pick up. And then when they hear me read it, sometimes it comes out. There's a lot of little secrets in that book that some people still haven't found yet. As for the person Lillian I've switched lives with, that's amazing. G'day, Christine from Sydney. Nice to see you, I guess. And thank you for your walk with Miss Monique Wells, Entree to Black Paris. Tell me, how do I purchase an autographed copy of your book? Says Andreas or Andreas. Well, to get an autographed copy, you'd have to get it from my, I'd have to send it from Paris. So what we do with the books, and we didn't talk about this yet, but there's, in the link that I put above, the earfultower.com/DC, there's two options for you. So there's a bunch of the books in a bookshop called Bonjour Books, and you can get one of them from there. If you guys are in Washington, that's probably your best bet. You could go and even pick it up. But otherwise, we send them from Seattle. You'll see on that link. But for an autographed book, I'd have to send it from Paris, which is tricky because I'm not even in Paris, and it's more expensive for postage. So either you just get one normally and I sign it next time I see you, or send me a message and we can figure something out.
Next time you come to DC to talk.
We can talk about and I really don't want to talk about the pandemic at all, because it's we all hear way too much about it. But I was meant to be doing a big book tour around the States, and that's the reason why this that trip was canceled. So that's the reason why we're doing this on Zoom. But next time I would love to come to DC and do an in-person tour. So please don't strike me off. Don't blacklist me from the list. I would love to be there one day. I hope this has been a good performance.
Of course. Looks like you already have a place in DC for your next trip and for your next event with Alliance Française. Greg says that you can stay at our place very close to the French embassy. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Greg. That's kind of you.
Well, as you can see, Oliver, you're very welcome in DC. As soon as borders are open, as soon as we are back to traveling, it would be wonderful to have you here. And thank you all for joining in on Sunday morning I think it's been a very fun trip to Paris. Thank you, Oliver, for bringing Paris to us, though we can't go there now. Really, thank you for everything. And it's I guess we'll stay in touch through the book and through the podcast. And thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, and everyone had such lovely questions and big smiles that it made it a great way to spend a Sunday evening for me. I guess I'll see you next time I'm in DC.
Merci beaucoup.
Looking at everyone. Oh, look at you guys. There's a few dogs there too.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm going to leave you to it. Merci.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. À bientôt.
Bye, everyone.
Merci à vous tous. À bientôt.